Hello and welcome back as we continue our reading of the Bible that Jesus read by Philip Yancey. Again, if you want a copy of your own, you can check out the description. We have the link to the Amazon page that sells them. We've been going through the chapter 5 on Ecclesiastes, the end of wisdom, and this section is called The Curse of Getting What You Want. Maybe you've wanted something before and then got it and realized it wasn't really what it was touted as being. So here we go. I also puzzled over the traditional identification of the teacher with Solomon, the author of many of those proverbs. Most biblical scholars doubt that Solomon actually wrote Ecclesiastes. The book itself names no author, and various clues hint at a later date. Still, the book was clearly written under Solomon's shadow. If a playwright today based a play on a president plagued by scandal who resigned from office under threat of impeachment, the play need not name Richard Nixon for the audience to get the point. Similarly, the whole tone of Ecclesiastes reflects the tenor of King Solomon's time, when Israel reached its zenith as the nation. And there's the rub. How can the bleak despair of Ecclesiastes issue from the era of Israel's golden age, when things were going so well? The days of slavery in Egypt might produce such a gloomy volume, I reasoned, but not the glory days of Solomon and his royal successors. My reading of modern literature, in which I often heard overtones of Ecclesiastes, changed my assumptions. It had always seemed odd to me that the modern existential philosophy of despair originated in one of the loveliest cities on earth, Paris, during a time of expanding wealth and opportunity. Curiously, I learned existential despair, whether in the teacher or in Camus, tends to sprout from the soil of excess. Why? Walker Percy's book of essays, The Message in the Bottle, begins with examples of this anomaly. Percy asks a stream of questions, including these. Why do more people commit suicide in San Francisco, the most beautiful city in America, than any other city? In Europe, the suicide capital is Salzburg, Austria. Why was it that Jean-Paul Sartre, sitting in a French cafe writing Nausea, which is about the absurdity of human existence and the nausea of life in the 20th century, why was he the happiest man in France at the time? Why is it a man riding a good commuter train from Larchmont to New York, whose needs and drives are satisfied, who has a good home, loving wife and family, good job, who enjoys unprecedented cultural and recreational facilities, often feels bad without knowing why? Percy goes on to explain that despair arises out of circumstances of plenty rather than deprivation. Indeed, I did not find alienation and despair in the grim 3-volume Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn. I found rage, a passion for justice, and a defiant will to survive. As Viktor Frankl explains in Man's Search for Meaning, the victims of the concentration camps, he among them, did not dare succumb to meaninglessness, for only an enduring faith in meaning kept them alive. Existential despair did not germinate in the hellholes of Auschwitz or Siberia, but rather in the cafes of Paris, the coffee shops of Copenhagen, the luxury palaces of Beverly Hills. After a trip into Eastern Europe during the Cold War, novelist Philip Roth reported, in the West, everything goes and nothing matters, while in the East, nothing goes and everything matters. Paradoxically, then, a despairing book like Ecclesiastes will more likely emerge from a golden age. Consider the contrast between Ecclesiastes and Job. They cover many of the same themes: life's unfairness, why suffering exists, why evil people prosper and good ones suffer. But what a difference in tone. Ecclesiastes exudes meaninglessness and futility, while Job rings with betrayal, passion, and a cry for justice. Job shakes his fist at God, calls him into account, demands a reply. The teacher shrugs his shoulders, mumbles, "So what?" and reaches for another goblet of wine. The two define the spectrum of despair, from the anguish of unrelieved suffering to the decadent boredom of surfeit. The tone of Ecclesiastes captures precisely the mood of the affluent Western countries. Wendell Berry recalls the society of his comfortable U.S. upbringing as one in which we knew and took for granted marriage without love, sex without joy, drink without conviviality, birth, celebration, and death without adequate ceremony, faith without doubt or trial, belief without deeds, manners without generosity. Such humanizing emotions as pleasure in small profitless things, joy, wonder, ecstasy, were removed as by an operation on the brain. Or consider the scene in the secular Europe where people drive BMWs and Volvos, eat in gourmet restaurants, visit sex shops, and pursue the good life. Having abandoned colonial ambitions, they even respond with tempered compassion to the latest international crisis of flood and famine. One would not call them wicked, yet they demonstrate no interest in God and no passion for morality. Such people outrage Job. They spend their years in prosperity and go down to the grave in peace. Yet they say to God, "Leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him?" Ecclesiastes, though, toys with such a philosophy as an appealing model. According to Jack Miles, Ecclesiastes neither curses nor blesses God, but only finds him incomprehensible and does his best to hedge all bets, including any bet on wisdom or righteousness. A clue into the origin of existential despair appears in a phrase early in Ecclesiastes, when the teacher exclaims, "What a heavy burden God has laid on men," in chapter 1, verse 13. He goes on to describe the burden in biographical detail. The teacher's burden, unlike Job's, did not involve personal misfortune, but was, to the contrary, a burden of excess. He attained great wisdom. He attempted social programs on a massive scale. He accumulated more wealth than anyone before him. He sought after every kind of pleasure. Yet in all of these things, he concluded at the end, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. All he got for his efforts was a fear of death and a bad case of insomnia. Why bother? And the teacher never really expected to solve life's riddles, and his attitude of resignation contrasts sharply with Job's combativeness. Unlike Job, unlike so many of the psalmists, the teacher apparently does not have a passionate relationship with God. He has slipped into idolatry, not the kind involving pagan statues, but the kind widespread in modern times, as in Western Europe, where only a tiny fraction attend church of any type, and people devote themselves instead to pursuing the quality of life. Or the idolatry of the U.S., where we insist we have guaranteed right to satisfy our pleasures and nobody gets to stop us. The teacher would agree with this caveat: you'll never succeed, you'll always want more. Here is his conclusion. In this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these: a righteous man perishing in his righteousness, and a wicked man living long in his wickedness. Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. The teacher's advice: be good, but not too good, wise, but not too wise, is a fine example of the search for a golden mean of behavior. After tasting the extremes on both sides, the teacher settles in halfway between hedonism and suicide. And on that happy note, we're going to end for the week. And hopefully you'll continue joining us as we continue reading the Bible that Jesus read by Philip Yancey. We'll see you next time.